You are not going to believe what happened when my HOA tried to take over my garage, without knowing it's actually an official fire department substation. Yeah, you heard that right. They came at me with threats, warnings, and fines, all over a garage they thought I was using illegally. Little did they know, they were about to pick a fight with the fire department itself. This is one of those stories where you just sit back and think, asterisk, how did no one stop and think this through, asterisk? So here's how it all started. A few weeks back, I got this very formal-looking letter from the HOA claiming that my garage was not in compliance with community standards. They accused me of doing unauthorized renovations and said they had the right to seize control of it if I didn't restore it to original condition. The thing is, I hadn't renovated anything. What they were seeing, those antennas, the heavy-duty equipment, the weird little keypad on the side of the door, wasn't my personal project. It's part of an emergency response agreement that's been in place for years. My garage is officially registered as a satellite substation for our local fire department. It's got communication gear, rescue equipment, and serves as a rapid access point in case of fires or medical emergencies in this part of the neighborhood. But the HOA, they didn't want to hear it. They ignored the paperwork I showed them, brushed off the fire chief's call, and kept insisting they had the authority to reclaim the space. It got to a point where they even tried to change the locks on emergency response property. That's when things really started to spiral. I had no idea just how far they'd go to prove a point, or how badly that decision would backfire. Let's just say, when the fire department finally stepped in, it didn't end well for the HOA. But before we get to that showdown, you need to hear the wild things they tried first. So, here's the part that really blew my mind. After I got that first warning letter, I honestly thought it was just a mistake, like maybe the HOA didn't know about the substation agreement. It has been a while since it was set up, and most of the board members now weren't around when it happened. So I figured I'd go talk to them, explain the situation, and clear it up. I even brought copies of the paperwork, signed documents, maps, even the old newsletter where the fire department announced the partnership with the neighborhood. Thought it would be a 5-minute conversation. Nope. The board didn't want to hear it. One of them, this guy named Carl, who, by the way, seems to think he's the sheriff of the whole subdivision, told me that it doesn't matter what agreement used to be in place, and that the HOA had final say over all property appearances. I tried to explain that this wasn't a cosmetic thing, it was literally tied to emergency services. Carl just waved it off and said, then they can go put their stuff somewhere else. At this point, I'm thinking, asterisk, are they serious, asterisk, like, this isn't a hobby shed, it's a critical access point for first responders. But the more I tried to reason with them, the more pushback I got. Then came the violation notices, 3 in 1 week. They started stacking up like junk mail. One of them even claimed I was running a business out of my garage, which is completely false. Another said I was in breach of HOA aesthetics because of the keypad and a small antenna. It was ridiculous. But then things got weirder. A few days later, I noticed someone taking photos of the garage from across the street. At first, I thought it was just a nosy neighbor. But later that night, I checked my security cam footage, and guess who it was? Carl. He was out there with a flashlight, measuring tape, and something that looked like a clipboard, in the dark, sneaking around like he was on some kind of covert mission. And that's when I realized they weren't just being petty. They were planning something big. The next week was a total mess. I thought things couldn't get more bizarre, but somehow the HOA kicked things up a notch. I started getting letters not just from the HOA now, but also from their lawyer. Apparently, they were reviewing the legality of my garage setup and claimed I had failed to get proper architectural approval for the installation of external hardware. They were referring to the emergency antenna and the fire access keypad, stuff that had been installed years ago with full cooperation from the fire department. It was like they were just making things up to see what would stick. Meanwhile, I reached out to the fire chief again to update him. He was stunned. He couldn't believe they were actually pushing back after getting formal documentation. He told me not to worry and that they'd handle it from their side, but I could tell even he was shocked by how far this HOA was going. And that's when we uncovered something else. Turns out, the HOA had recently changed hands, and the new board had been rewriting community rules quietly, adding vague language about unauthorized external structures and non-residential use of residential property. It was like they were building a case from the shadows. Behind the scenes, neighbors started taking sides. Some people who knew about the fire substation setup came to check in on me, saying things like, "We've always felt safer knowing that was there." Others, though, probably the ones who thought the antennas looked ugly or whatever, started spreading rumors that I was operating a radio tower or storing dangerous equipment. The weirdest theory I heard, that I was running some kind of secret prepper bunker. Seriously. At the same time, Carl started walking around the neighborhood like he was running for office, chatting up residents, handing out flyers about community integrity, and framing my garage like it was a threat to the neighborhood's image. It was wild how personal he made it. He even tried to bring it up at a community block party, right in front of a few off-duty firefighters, who, thankfully, said nothing but gave him the look asterisk. Still, behind all the drama and gossip, I knew something bigger was brewing. The HOA wasn't just flexing power, they were building a legal trap, and I could feel them closing in. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure from the HOA only intensified. I was constantly on edge, checking my mailbox every morning, dreading what new violation or threat might be waiting there. The tension wasn't just about the garage anymore, it was about what this fight represented. It felt like a battle between community rules and common sense, between bureaucracy and public safety. Every call with the HOA's lawyer was draining. They kept insisting that their new rules gave them the right to demand the removal of unauthorized equipment, but they refused to acknowledge the fire department's official role. It was like they were playing a game, and I was just a pawn. Then came the notice that shook everything, a formal hearing scheduled by the HOA board, where they planned to vote on whether to take legal action to seize the garage. They claimed that if I didn't comply, they would pursue eviction of the substation equipment and reclaim the property. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't just a dispute anymore. It was a direct attack on emergency services, and the stakes suddenly felt so much higher. I reached out again to the fire department, and this time, the fire chief told me they were mobilizing. The department saw the potential danger, not just to me, but to the whole neighborhood. Losing that substation could slow response times in emergencies, and that was unacceptable. But while the fire department prepared to step in officially, the HOA kept pushing forward with their plans, acting like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, the neighborhood atmosphere grew heavier. Conversations at block parties stopped being casual and turned into hushed debates about who's right and what comes next. Carl, the HOA board member who started all this, was more aggressive than ever. He even tried to have a local TV crew come film the garage, painting it as a nuisance. The tension between neighbors reached a breaking point, and I felt the walls closing in. Then, just days before the hearing, something unexpected happened. I came home late one night to find the garage door slightly ajar, the keypad damaged, and some of the equipment inside had been tampered with. It was clear someone had been there. But who? And why now? The timing couldn't have been worse, and it pushed the entire situation into dangerous territory. The hearing was looming, the HOA was gearing up for a showdown, and the fire department was ready to fight back. But no one knew exactly how this was going to end. What would happen when all sides finally faced off? That's where the real story begins. Just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, the plot thickened in a way I never saw coming. The day after I found the garage door damaged, I got a call from someone claiming to be an anonymous whistleblower inside the HOA. At first, I was skeptical. Had this whole thing spiraled into some kind of prank? But the voice on the other end sounded serious and warned me that the HOA board wasn't just targeting my garage because of community standards. There was something deeper at play, something about a plan to repurpose parts of the neighborhood for a big development project, and my garage substation was standing in the way. Apparently, a local developer had been in talks with some of the new board members behind closed doors. If they could shut down the fire substation, they'd have a clear path to expand into that section of the neighborhood without any resistance. Suddenly, the HOA's aggressive stance wasn't about rules or appearances anymore. It was about money and power. The anonymous tip made me realize this wasn't just about me and my garage. It was about the future of the whole community. Meanwhile, tensions were boiling over. The fire chief pushed back hard, calling the HOA's bluff and warning that any interference with the substation could endanger lives. But the HOA doubled down, filing an injunction that could force me to remove critical equipment within 48 hours. The hearing transformed from a routine dispute into a high-stakes legal battle, with the neighborhood watching closely. To make matters worse, I started receiving strange messages, cryptic texts, missed calls from unknown numbers, even a note slipped under my door that said, "This isn't over." It felt like someone wanted me to back down, but I wasn't about to give up something so important, especially knowing how vital that garage was to emergency response. With the hearing just hours away, the situation was a powder keg. The HOA was ready to strike, the fire department was prepared to fight, and the whole neighborhood was caught in the middle of this escalating conflict. What would happen when these forces finally collided? The answer was about to explode in ways nobody expected. The day of the hearing arrived, and I could feel the weight of the entire neighborhood's eyes on me. The HOA boardroom was packed. Neighbors, fire department officials, and even a few reporters showed up, sensing this wasn't just another property dispute. Carl and the rest of the HOA board sat at the front, looking confident, but I noticed the tension behind their forced smiles. The fire chief was there too, standing firmly beside me, ready to defend the substation. When the HOA lawyer presented their case, it was all about rules and supposed community standards, but I came prepared with the official documentation, letters from the fire department, and testimonies from neighbors who understood the importance of the substation. The fire chief spoke last, laying out in clear terms how vital that garage was, not just for our street, but for emergency response times across the area. It was impossible to argue with that. After hours of back and forth, the board was forced to admit they had no legal ground to seize the garage. The substation was protected under public safety laws, and the HOA's new rules couldn't override that. The crowd murmured with relief, and I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. It seemed like the battle was over. Victory for common sense, the fire department, and the neighborhood's safety. But just when I thought it was safe to breathe again, the fire chief pulled me aside. He revealed that the anonymous whistleblower was actually someone on that HOA board who wanted to stop the development plan from moving forward. They had been feeding me information to expose the shady dealings behind the scenes. Turns out, a few board members were secretly divided, some pushing the development, others trying to protect the community. Then came the final twist. As we walked out of the hearing, a local news crew caught wind of the story and broadcast it live. The public outrage forced the developer to pull back, and the HOA board members who had been involved faced serious consequences. But the biggest shock: Carl resigned on the spot, admitting he had underestimated how important that garage and the community's voice really was. In the end, it wasn't just about one garage or one neighborhood. It was about standing up when it mattered most. And sometimes, the real power lies in refusing to back down. After Carl's resignation, the neighborhood slowly began to heal. The tension that had been thick in the air started to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of community. The fire department officially reaffirmed their partnership with us, and they even held an open house at the substation to show neighbors exactly what goes on in that garage. It was eye-opening for many people to see the emergency equipment and understand how critical the substation really is for our safety. The HOA board also underwent a major shakeup. Several members were voted out in the next election, and the new leadership promised to be more transparent and focused on the community's well-being rather than hidden agendas. I made it a point to get involved, helping to bridge the gap between residents, the fire department, and the HOA so that nothing like this could happen again.